The Kyne legacy in the military and the McGuire legacy in the military has been like centuries old. My grandfather, Joseph Kyne, went to World War II. William B. Kyne went to World War I. My grandfather, McGuire, retired as a full colonel from the United States Air Force. So all my childhood we talked about, you know, war at the dinner table. War was cool, military was cool. Everything was cool. You got a point of discipline, served your country, all the honor, the nobility, and the integrity you have to serve your country. So that's what we did. And then, so it was my turn. I was totally enthused by the opportunity to serve the American people. And I went in the military. I enlisted when I was 17 years old. And then I was trained down at Fort Sam Houston as a medical specialist. After that, I was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia to go to airborne school. They trained me as a parachutist. And I was assigned to the 34th Medical Battalion, the 44th Medical Brigade.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor.
The war started January 17th, and the United States bombed Kuwait and southern Iraq for 45 days. Raining bombs, not just, you know, a little air raid here and there. They rained what turned out to be between 300 and 350 tons of depleted uranium into the soil and all over the landscape of the Middle East, just putting a toxic thumbprint on that area using a radioactive element known as depleted uranium now. And so they rained these bombs there for 45 days. Every night they'd bomb, and all day they would send bombs, and we sent bombs 24 hours a day, and it was like sitting around in an airport all day because planes were just blazing by all day. So because southern Iraq and Kuwait had been so extensively bombed, everybody was running into this 300 to 350 tons of depleted uranium.
Dense depleted uranium slashes through metal, spontaneously erupts in a fireball. Much of the dart-like projectiles turn to flaming dust. DU is brutally lethal and difficult to clean up. Slightly radioactive, half of it decays in 4 billion years. Depleted uranium can outshoot the Iraqis. The 1991 Gulf War was an overwhelming rout, but it left the battlefield littered with more than just charred hulks and dead soldiers. Years later, activists say Geiger counters confirmed presence of radioactive dust from those uranium bullets, and that dust, some say, may be a crucial clue, a clue to mysterious Gulf War illnesses. Thousands of soldiers breathed smoky post-battle air filled with particles too small even for gas mask filters.
It was all A-10s, Warthog tank rounds, cruise missiles from the ships, and they're all nuclear. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it's in every single round that's coming out. You can't, I mean, 300 tons of it is confirmed, 350 even by some folks. But what really happened was the soldiers were walking into depleted uranium. They walked into it, their insides started melting. They had extreme radioactive exposure symptoms instantly. They were pale as a ghost. They were vomiting. They were falling over in place. They were walking around looking like they had just come out of a microwave oven. There was a forward group that had to come in to dew clean this up. It was toxic. It was radioactive, and they didn't want the media or the world to see this. And so the media or the world never saw it because the engineers dug out trenches on the side of the road and buried everything. And those soldiers that worked in that area have what they refer to as a lot of alpha radiation by way of ingestion, the dust particles that were created. So they ingest these particles, they get in here, and they stay in your lungs and your kidneys for so long because a lot of these troops worked in this area for months on end cleaning it up. And so this happened to them. They ingested these particles, they became very, very sick. You have gamma radiation, beta radiation, and alpha radiation. I saw all the symptoms of all of them in 1991, and I had no idea what I was looking at then. This weaponry should not be used next to a ground soldier because there is no medical treatment for it, there's no cleanup for it. If you're hitting civilians, you're hitting turf, you're hitting pavement, you're hitting buildings. Don't put this stuff near the American soldiers. us, the Army guys.
The world scientific community has been following people that are exposed to much higher levels of natural uranium, again, for probably the past 4 or 5 decades. So we understand more than enough to draw the conclusion.
Why these Army officers indicate to us that the human being can sustain higher levels of radioactivity. And that's bullshit, because there's no creature on Earth that is less resilient to radioactivity than the human creature. Way back, and they got us back into the States just about as quick as you could, because they didn't want any of these kids to die in Saudi Arabia or Iraq, because they would have had to been considered combat casualties. So they got them home where they could die and nobody would see it. So we were on commercial airplanes flying home, and they were telling us we were heroes, but something was fishy. Almost 10 to 15,000 of the veterans from Desert Storm that have been accounted for are dead, and roughly 250,000 veterans are collecting a check like mine for illnesses incurred during Operation Desert Storm. 250,000, that makes almost half of the original fighting force as a casualty of combat. Now, that's a horrific statistic to lose, roughly overall 1/3 of your fighting force to either death or disability. That's a joke. And people say, hey, Dennis, what's Gulf War syndrome? I say, well, it's nothing. They won't define it. I get a check for undiagnosed illnesses. $201, they won't diagnose me because that means they have to admit they're using chromosome-altering weapons or something. Go put your uranium back in the ground and you won't have this problem. It's not a cancer, it's a munition. A metal munition that has a 4.5 billion-year half-life. Stop using it. So we're going to get the same exact result. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers sick, thousands of soldiers dead. We're going to get the same result. That's really shocking. By creating something that if you're downwind of, you'll be dealing with for 4.5 billion years, which is longer than the human experience. Which means we might be the next extinct species. You have to stretch your brain beyond PlayStation and hit the reset button and everybody's alive again.
The only thing I've ever been entrusted with in the military is the health and welfare of the soldiers. That's it. I've never been interested in shooting anybody or killing anybody. I was always interested in the health and welfare of the soldiers.
How do you think this is going to end? Well, I think it's going to be a tragedy for a lot of United States soldiers.
Serving San Jose and Campbell, the Community Channel, Channel 15A.
Folks, I'm David Bonacera, and this is Environmental Concerns. Folks, I have something really interesting. You've probably heard it before, but I have Dennis Kyne with me, and he is a Gulf War veteran. He's a medic. In 1991, he was the first to come with his unit and the last to leave. Unfortunately, he's trained in a lot of things, including nuclear stuff. But the thing I guess that's really important here is what he's going to come out with and tell you, which is still happening today. I mean, from what I'm told, I guess in this last Gulf War, we dropped 1,000 pounds, 1,000 pounds of, actually I believe 1 million or so tons of bombs. But the problem is that we're using depleted uranium in the shells and other things. Well, is this scary? Yes. The Earth turns. Yes, this is a problem. Is it a problem for generations? Yes. Are we going to make a huge thumbprint, maybe a handprint in Iraq and have an environmental nightmare? Yeah, that's the scary part. Please don't go anywhere. This is really, really important. Hang tight. We'll be right back.
Is your family at risk from unhealthy indoor air? You don't have to live with indoor air pollution. Get the facts from your local extension office or health department. It's time for healthy indoor air for America's homes.
Hi, we're back again with Dennis Kyne. Dennis, thank you for being here. Cameron Colson will be here shortly, by the way. Okay, you've given me the facts. I've seen the tape. For our viewers, all I can say is, what's up?
Right.
I mean, this was very disturbing. I was almost in tears when I saw this video today. And what I was thinking really was about future generations. Talk a little bit. I mean, you were in Iraq for 10 months.
Right.
Your unit was, because you were a medic, was the first one there and the last to leave.
Right.
Talk about mop-ups. Go ahead.
Talk about mop-ups, absolutely. The future generations, scenario is I started that in 1991, the future generations scenario. I was telling people, man, it's really got me looking at little kids, very concerned. I was 21 years old, and I was alarmed at the fear I had for our future generations, because what I had witnessed over there was unexplainable. There was a lot of misinformation and a lot of things being told to the American public that they were never substantiated or justified. And so, yes, I was one of the first support units shipped to the Middle East after Saddam Hussein invaded Iraq, or Kuwait back in 1990. And he invaded in August of 1990, so we shipped shortly after that because they needed medics in the country, and we were one of the first companies in the whole Army to have Humvee ambulances.
Okay.
So we had the special ambulances that could drive through anything. So we got shipped over there. We were all the way up front with the 24th Infantry Division, the tankers. And so they were in the tank battles, and when the ceasefire occurred, we were the last medical unit to leave the front line.
I mean, you spent 10 months there. The war didn't last that long.
Right.
So fill in the blanks for me.
Fill in the blanks. Between August and the 90 days post the day we got there, because what happened, our vehicles sat on ships. We flew on a plane and our vehicles came on ships, so they got there long behind us. We stayed in this area called Cement City, which was just a toxic dump. Used to be a cement factory. And that was where we stayed. And then when our vehicles showed up, we went out into the desert where we were exposed to all kinds of ingestion of sand, which turned our insides into tapioca. This coupled with the vaccination shots we'd had, people were they had dysentery. So we had heat casualties that were incredible, but the rodents really were very, very poisonous out there in the middle of nowhere. So they brought in these pesticides to kill everything, and these aren't pests, these are rodents. So you imagine how toxic they must have been. The people were walking into them.
And I know that toxins like pesticides accelerate with heat.
Absolutely.
And outgas.
Right.
Been there.
And then you have this other situation was the Department of Defense ran out of their own pesticides, so they started buying on the black market in the Middle East and dumping them everywhere. Then, so that's our blanks. What we're doing is we're moving forward gradually from Doha, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all the way to the southern border of Iraq, or the northern border of Saudi Arabia, which is where we're sitting. That's what we spent from August to January doing. And we spent Christmas out, in a modified airfield that we were creating to bring our people forward.
We were talking earlier, and you were talking about, let's just get into the whole thing,
right.
the midst of this. And you were talking about all the clouds. Well, we were showing on TV all the oil wells spewing, all the black clouds. Yeah, a lot of that was there, but there was a lot of stuff that we saw that really was something else.
Right. Unique to the world, obviously, because they weren't attending nuclear, biological, chemical school in Fort Benning, Georgia, like I was. But one of the things you study as a young private all the way through your military command is the flash and the blast of a nuclear impact, and we're trained to...
Now, I just heard on ABC today that, the military's denying that there was anything other than just bombs in that stuff. But yet, I'm talking to a buddy of mine who's in the space program, and he's talking about, oh yeah, those pretty things you see up in the air? Yeah, that's depleted uranium. But everybody's told that it's not that bad. You were a medic out there. You were trained in what?
Well, not only was I trained in the nuclear, biological, chemical, not advanced nuclear medicine, so to speak, but I'm looking for signs and symptoms. Because as a medic, you're looking for signs and symptoms so you can find a causal relationship between what happened and why the people are sick. And so what you're looking at above ground detonations. If you're going to tell me that these are...
So this shock and awe, a lot of it was...
above ground detonations, and the reason, it's not rocket science. If you want to find conventional warheads, you look at Hamburg during World War II. You find craters and bombed out areas everywhere.
Go look at the footage yourself. There's no bombed out craters anywhere. There's no dug out craters. There's no bomb craters. They're all above ground detonations. They're not destroying property, which is Attorney General Ramsey Clark's definition of nuclear weaponry. It kills property. I mean, I'm sorry, it kills all people, vegetation, and animals, but it keeps property intact.
Oh,
and
lovely.
so all the property's there, but there's no craters. But all the people are dead because human beings are the least resilient creature to radioactivity that there is.
So basically what you're saying is that what we're doing to Iraq, you know, we're sitting, stick my foot in my mouth, but, okay, they have weapons of mass destruction, no doubt. They went to the north, took care of the Kurds, completely wiped that out. Iran backed off, okay, and they're doing their little thing. But the point is that I guess coming in, are we any better with what we're doing than what he did? Ours is just long term. Theirs was short and sweet, as they would call it. We called it just complete annihilation.
Well, but this is definitely an overwhelming use of force, but this was also just written into the budget plan. They wrote overwhelming force as a approved method in the new budget plan that they picked up the $400 billion for. But the problem is that the scientists have become detached from reality. They're trying to scientifically analyze this and say, oh, it's okay to use this. It's okay, no problem. The human being has been exposed to higher levels of natural uranium, therefore it's okay. But this is reprocessed enriched uranium. It's not natural uranium. It's gone through a process before it became weaponized. Therefore, it's not natural uranium.
Okay.
It means the scientists have become detached.
So is this worse?
Well, it means that there has to be a mental transformation in the scientific community to really expose uranium by looking at the chemical chart and saying, hey, it's radioactive. It says right